Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are recording.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. We'll move to item 5.1, 5.0, 5.1 of the Committee of the Whole meeting, Animal Care and Animal Control.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you all hear me? Excellent.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you, through your mayor. Thank you for hearing me this evening. The purpose of the report that I'm coming to you with tonight is about animal care and animal control. Just the kind of the purpose, a little bit. Staff would like more direction to hear from council on some expectations around animal care and animal control within the district. This will give staff the needed information to move forward with researching appropriate options. So just a little background that you may have read in my report there. Just to summarize a bit, animal control is becoming a growing concern with management and the public, as indicated by the increase in public complaints. So we're getting aggressive dog complaints, stray dogs, feral cats. Currently, the bylaw officer's duties only outline some of the responsibilities in dealing with animal control, but does not properly address animal care. Okay, animal control is a complex issue, and it is consuming for staff, and it's costly for the district. Although the public and staff have come up with some unique solutions in the past to help with animal care, these are not sustainable long-term solutions, and staff feel that this needs to be addressed in order to reduce the district's liability exposure. A couple of the issues more concerning to staff that we are dealing with on a regular basis are domestic animals that reside outside of the community, so in our neighboring communities, and wander into district boundaries. The other concern that we have is the perception that the district will take action when animal control measures in these neighboring jurisdictions are inadequate and maintaining the safety and health of both the animals and the people in the community. Some examples of these may be that public care finding animals outside of the district boundary on the highway. They bring the animal into our boundaries, wanting us to take care of the animal and do things with that, proceed with that, or the public even showing up on our staff's doorsteps on weekends or after hours and expecting the animal to be taken in and taken care of. Those are unrealistic expectations, and the public need to understand that, and we need to do some education around it, definitely. So some discussion points that I'd like to kind of point out here is staff has had some initial discussions over the years with various organizations around the province on animal care, but no action has been taken to date. Some of the topics of concern identified by staff that we would like to have discussion around are direction from council on animal care and animal control. We'd like to hear what your thoughts are and, expectations. Also, discussion needs to be funding for staff time and training on animal control, and proper funding for animal care facilities. So you may or may not know our facility it is what it is. It is run down, and at this point it does not meet the animal care facilities regulations in that. So some discussions need to be had on where do we want this to go in order to do that. Otherwise we could be in some trouble housing animals, and if they become sick or whatever, we could be into a liability issue. So thank you again for hearing me this evening, and I'm eager to hear council's thoughts in order for us to research and develop sustainable long-term solutions. So I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Oiki. I can't remember who was first, Councillor Wiebe or Councillor Leach? Councillor Wiebe, go up for it. Beauty before age?
Age before beauty. I got stifled on the constables issue and never got my question answered, so I'll go first. Do we have any kind of arrangements, or do they have animal control in the surrounding areas? Is my number one question. Okay, they don't. So has it been approached that maybe we form some kind of a contract with that, like a pay for service type of thing? Has it ever been approached, or do you know?
And not that I know of prior to me taking the position. Yeah, I have not had the discussions because I've been trying to ponder how the heck we're going to deal with this issue. I will say that the RCMP and the tribal police have the same consensus that this needs to be dealt with because they're being called out as well on a regular basis on animal control issues. So, one of my thoughts is possibly discussions with the neighboring community leadership, just seeing how they're approaching it. We know how it's being approached, but there doesn't seem to be an appetite in there from the leadership's perspective to do this that I know of, but we have not approached them yet.
Okay, and maybe if I could ask a second question, either to Mr. Taylor or Mr. Deniker or you, Mr. Oike, if it could be a staff-to-staff discussion, because I hate to see you dealing with all the surrounding areas, but it becomes a Lillooet problem. that kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where it does come as everybody. We are the feeder. We are the center of all the feeders, groups and communities, and they just expect the bigger ones to take care of it. And it's no different from the city of Kamloops. Same thing. Everybody comes there and drops the animals off there, with the caveat that they actually have a BCSPCA facility that does that. So yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Leach?
Good evening, Darren. And before I say this, if staff feel that this is going too far into HR, please feel free to cut me off. But some of the misconception from the public, I think, might also be, I feel, is being fueled by I guess our staff staff member looking over the whole scope of things has not set clear boundaries on what the role and duty is. So I think that is a priority from my perspective, that this is what we will do or we are doing, but no further. Like showing up at the staff member's house is not acceptable. I know that there's different from like a taxpayer perspective. Everybody has a different view of what is, sorry, I've lost my words. Like what, there's some people, for example, I'll just throw it out there. There's some people that think that cats are okay to be outdoor cats, and there's some that are like, nope, strictly indoor. People need to have like an opening on their window that's all fenced and caged. And so I think we need to really address that in the education piece before we go forward and make any decisions, because whatever decisions we make have a financial impact, and we need to be clear on what our expectations are for the role. Because I believe the official title, and correct me if I'm wrong, is Education and Enforcement Officer. So I think the formal education, not just from the staff member, but coming directly from the district office as a whole, needs to be on the same page.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. I think exactly as you outlined, obviously, is going to be part of the options research. It makes sense. Is that not correct, Mr. Oike? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, and their draft animal bylaw is there that we're going to bring forward, but there needs to be some tweaks and some other stuff. So there are some stuff around actual cat information that we need to, that I wanted to research a little bit more before I brought the animal control, because that's where it really is lying. One of our major problems is the
Right.
feral cat.
Yeah.
So
Councillor Howe?
Thank you. To the mayor, Mr. Oiki. When staff is asking for direction from council, and I understand that you yourself and possibly other staff members have spoken with other communities regarding how they handle these particular situations and what processes they have in place and policies. So I would assume that those would come before us, and that's not necessarily what you're asking for direction on, but rather getting a flavor for the type of or the depth of care and process that you think council would like to see. For example, and correct me if I'm wrong, do we want to see, for example, the pound cleaned up and updated and sort of reinstated? Do we want to have a process that cares for animals being brought to the district that are from outer areas? Is that sort of more what you're... Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, it's what do we want to entertain going into that full humane society type stuff, right? Like more right now, the District of Lillooet and the bylaw officer's job description is on animal control, which is dogs at large or animals at large and taking care of them in the pound. In no direction in the job description does it say you're taking on animals as they were strays or anything like that, right? So it's very vague on how that is. So we're looking, is that an appetite that the council wants to go down? And what that means then is, more hours and more training, more liability, policies and procedures need to be put into place in that, right? So
Yeah, that's your study that you're going to do for us.
correct, right? Yeah. So
Councillor Howe, you have another second question there before Councillor Huppel?
Thank you. Yes, just a follow-up question to that then. Thank you, Mr. Oiki. I would love to see brought forward some best practices for addressing very similar type issues that communities have put in place that have been quite successful, whether they're pretty standard or even off the cuff left field, but they're working. Yeah, I think in this particular instance, turning to what those other communities are doing successfully, that in a way that, for me personally, it would kill me to know that someone brought in a dog that was, I don't know, up Texas Creek Road or going up to Squamish, those bringing it here, because oftentimes people sadly will discard their animals on the side of the highway. And so, I don't know how much work the district's working in collaborating with the SPCA outside of Lillooet and forgive me, I can't remember the name of the actual animal organization in Lillooet. But maybe strengthening those ties or finding out what the district could be doing to aid them a little bit more in that process, thus not having to take on a lot of the costs, but still meeting the needs. I'd be interested in hearing more about those options as well. Thank you.
Good. That's essentially what this resolution is going to be, to bring us those options. I'm just going to caution council, because I've got a lot of experience in this from a while back. It's all about the money. It's all about the level of service that we require. And I can tell you right now, some small communities, whether you like it or not, and it's in writing, in order to achieve the level that they don't have to spend the money, they euthanize those animals very, very quickly. I personally do not want to see that, but that's essentially a fact of life. Councillor Huppel, you're next.
Thank you, through the mayor. So mine is obviously a financial question. Mr. Oiki, do you have any idea the projected cost to bring our current dog pound up to a provincial standard? That's my first part of my question. Because I've looked at it a few times, and I know the grass is overgrown. I know the it needs some work for sure, but I'm not sure what the cost. Do you know?
I haven't done any projections just because there are so many different standards in there. So just to give you a kind of idea, Squamish put one in, and it was $1 million. So
Okay,
that's
wow.
run by BCSPCA.
But that's what I say, guys, it's all about the money, and that's what this study is supposed to bring forward. You're gonna have more than one option, correct,
Yeah,
Mr. Oiki?
correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
because we
correct.
have that concern. It's the level of service, it's the moral and ethical impact it has on the animals, and versus how we're going to achieve that level of funding. And as I say, there are a lot of communities that have some really good ideas. They cost money. And the communities that don't want to spend the money, they euthanize radically, brilliantly. So
To do the second part of my question, is because some of these animals are out of the Lillooet boundaries, is SLRD involved in helping to support some of that financial strain that might be imposed on this bylaw?
That's one of the conversations that I've had actually with Director Vivian Birch Jones. So I asked her if she would be interested in that. And she says, yes, she'd be interested in entertaining and discussing those options, right? For sure. And that's definitely one of the key players, as well as our closest First Nation communities as well, and having those discussions with them as well. So just to clarify, I want to make sure that you understand. Councillor Howe brought up the organization. The organization does not exist anymore. That was here. It was simply the craft fair that was raising money to give to the pound funds and the spay neuter program. That has now been taken over by Amber McCabe at the Timber Mart. We've had discussions with them to clearly understand what it was, because there was no clear idea of how they operated. We just got this money, and all of a sudden we knew nothing of them switching over, and that was a meeting just of last week that we had to them to understand. And we wanted to understand if they were willing to have to manage volunteers to help out with the care for the animals and stuff. And there doesn't seem to be, they're willing to help out in any way, but they're not organized enough to be helping out with volunteers. They'll help out with money where they can. And it's the volunteer sector. If we were going to look at that, that's a huge, huge commitment. And everybody says they like to be in it. And we have lists of things. Our staff member, she was very good on coming up with a fostering program, which I totally like. The spay and neuter program, I'm not convinced that the district should be involved in that, but another entity and be in charge of that. So we're looking all at those options in there, and obviously costs is in mind, and I want to do it most cost effective and what makes sense for the community, but our leaders, our councils, to have some input into that. That's what I'm looking for, and how you want me to proceed with this, in a general manner, right? So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Councillor Wiebe, yes.
I'm never sure if you can see me. Mr. Oiki, I really feel like we need to get the other communities surrounding us and the SLRD and Area B and all of those involved in order to get the financial wherewithal to do anything. I think fixing up the pound that we have now, it really does nothing if you have cats. I mean, I'm sorry, you just cannot put them down there. And I'm wondering if I know it's not really a staff or a council thing, but I feel like without knowing, we have puppy mill people They may not be large puppy mills or large kitten mills, but there are people that are constantly giving away puppies, giving away kittens, selling kittens, like down at the mall or wherever. I don't know how we would control that, number one, but I'd like to see some kind of a report on that if you could add it in there somewhere. And years ago when we were evacuated for the fires, there was a building across the river where I took my cat, and then she was transferred over to Ashcroft, I believe. So do you know which building that was, and if it's available for such things, if we were looking into converting something into a facility? Do you recall?
I don't recall. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, like I say, it was midnight and I was here by myself, so I really don't even know. Somebody gave me a direction and I dropped her off, and then I picked her up in Ashcroft. But that, for some reason, I'm thinking it was either the forestry building or something over there, maybe owned by First Nations, that even that might become a facility, you know, to keep them before they're transported elsewhere.
I think I do remember that now. You say that. I think it was the old forestry building that's the health outreach, and it was a warehouse. There's a warehouse on the side there. I think that it was run, at that time, it was run by the, what were they called? It's a nonprofit society that came in to help evacuate animals out. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, we could look at that for sure.
Okay, folks, a lot of this discussion we're going to revisit again, obviously, once the options are delivered to us. So from right now, what we're discussing is whether we want staff to do this or whether we don't. So if I could have somebody move that staff be directed to research options for the District of Lillooet to better manage animal care, including potential partnerships with neighboring communities and the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. Who will so move? Councillor Howe, second Councillor Wiebe. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Council, and thank you, Mr. Oike. You have a big ticket item in front of you, and obviously you can see already there'll be lots of discussion when you bring that to us, and we wish you the best. It is a very serious problem, and one in which our community has to wrestle to the ground, so we know that. Thank you, folks. Okay, we'll move to item 6, no bylaws and resolutions. Item 7, no notice of motion. And I will go to item 8, 8.1, SILGA resolution discussion. Who will open this up?
I'll lead this discussion. Kimberly is with us too. We're going to try a digital whiteboard, basically, so she can bring that up on screen whenever she's ready. And we'll go through the resolutions in order to get some background information to accompany them. SILGA requests it, but doesn't require it for the resolutions, but it certainly helps the argument when it comes up for vote. If they make it through SILGA, these resolutions actually require this background document in order to be voted on at UBCM. So these resolutions are a political matter primarily. Staff will do what we can to assist, but it is at the political level of things. So staff try not to intervene too much beyond trying to make sure that the resolutions are correctly put and that the background information is put together. So if Kimberly, you're ready to throw the first one up on screen there. If not, I'll run down the hall. Is that working there for you, Kimberly? I'll be right back.
Is SILGA still going to be virtual, or are they planning to meet together?
It's still going to be virtual, sir.
That's too bad, because if you were going to meet that LGMA woman, I have a few choice words to convey. Oh, there we are.
Hopefully everyone can see that. So here we've got the first resolution, vacant land property tax. It was sponsored by Mr. Taylor, our planner, and this followed from discussions at our strategic planning sessions. So if there's any thoughts from council that you'd like to add to the background information, please let us know now, and Kimberly will just type them in. If there isn't anything, we'll just make something up that sounds reasonable and we'll move on to the next one.
So on this one, it's that because the district is surrounded by SLRD and 6 First Nations bands, that usable land and also our topography, our usable land is hard to come by. And so having landowners sit on vacant lots doesn't do us any good when it comes to getting, yeah, I don't know, something like that.
Oh, that's good too, because some of those vacant lands are serviced versus the exterior lands that aren't serviced.
Yeah.
It's a huge cost difference there too.
I second that emotion. You guys might have to jump in. You're small on the screen here. Councillor Reach, are you done? I think it's Councillor Weeb next, and then Councillor Hoppel. If I'm not paying close attention, don't be afraid to jump in, please.
I just have a question, really, not necessarily notes, but do we have it in any of our bylaws that when you purchase property, you have X number of time to build on it or put a modular on it or do something with it other than just letting it sit there for 10 years?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll jump in for this one. No, we don't have anything along those lines. I'm not actually even sure if we would have the authority to require active construction on a vacant lot. The reason why something like this is coming forward, and it's been done in the City of Vancouver in their charter, is to further encourage building as opposed to flat out saying thou must construct within 6 months of purchase, because that's always going to come back to, well, why didn't the previous owner have to construct? I don't think it's very enforceable because someone could just keep bouncing things back between number companies. And I just don't think we have the legal ability to do that under the Local Government Act or Community Charter.
Thank you. Who's next? Is that Councillor Hoppel?
Yes, thank you. So I'm just wondering, just to give an example, the heights, a lot of those properties are 33-foot lots. So I used to own a house up there, and the house was actually on 2 lots, and then there was a 3rd lot beside, which was a separate. So I had to pay separate fees and that. Are we asking people to do something with that piece of property that might sit next to their home and just make a larger yard, or should we be focused on more commercial properties?
Oh, thank you, through the mayor. I believe the point of this resolution is to ask the province to give us that authority. And then once we have that authority, we can start talking about what level of taxation council wants to impose. So if they do just want, it's in my mind, this would be something similar to a permissive tax exemption, but this would be just a permissive tax. So council could choose just to put it onto commercial properties, or they could also look at residential properties, or just large properties that have subdivision potential that aren't being utilized.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Leach?
Yeah, I just wanted to also add that there are a number of non-residents from larger cities that have purchased up empty lots just to cushion their bank account, I guess, and have no intention to build. Therefore, they don't have the community in mind when they purchase the lot. I guess there's a better way to put that, though. I'm really tired today. Sorry, guys.
No, what you're saying, speculation, you know, the word is speculation. I think it might be going, and that's true.
Yeah.
Some of that speculation is just holding good lands for development.
Like there's a particular lot that the guys owned for, let's say, 20 years approximately. And, you know, every year he phones up all the real estate agents and says, oh, what could I get for this? And as it's just gone up and gone up and gone up, and he's not paying really any different tax, and it's pennies to him, he's just holding on to it till he can really cash out, right? And I don't think it's got the community interest in that. So.
Okay. Anybody else next? Councillor Howell, you got your hand up there? No?
No, thank you. I
Okay.
feel like we've got it. I feel like we've got it.
That's good. Shall we move on, Mr. Deniger and?
Yep. Cognizant of the time, let's move on to number 2. Ms. G will bring the next one up. Fun with technology. If we were in person, we just have a big flip chart. So much easier.
Maybe soon, hopefully, fingers crossed.
I hope so. Wonderful. Dilapidated Z240 mobile homes. I love it. Mobile. So this came out of discussions way back, I think, maybe when I started here a year ago, about how one of the challenges we've heard as staff from the developers is that there's a barrier in cost to being able to get rid of these old dilapidated things so that they can build something nicer, or even just bring in nicer mobile homes. But any other thoughts that you want to add to this?
I don't know from my, oh, sorry, I'll just be quick and then I'll turn it over there. From my perspective is that with the dumping fees, tipping fees being so high, what some are doing obviously is taking them out of town, around town, and dumping them in the bush to avoid that fee. So in essence, we're degreening our environment based on that. It would almost make sense to lower the fee to encourage that's where they go. And then that's a sunk cost that province, SLRD and the like should swallow. Okay, Councillor Leach.
Yep. So from a taxation perspective, a lot of the mobile homes in this area are from the 1970s, and any of the mobile homes that are over 40 years old have completely depreciated in value. Therefore, it does affect our property assessments. And it also affects buyers wanting to move into the area, because if they don't have a large enough down payment for them, there is no or very little of the major mortgage holders or banks will give a person a mortgage on a mobile home that is over 40 years old.
Thank you. Councillor Weeb.
Yes, through the mayor. I was going to say about the tipping fees, but you already grabbed that one off me. So I'm thinking we could also put in there about the lack of land around here. Like if I'm sure that some of those lots might even get sold if it wasn't for the old trailers on them, because either the seller has to get rid of them or the purchaser has to. So I think that might be a good point to put in there as well.
Okay. You. Councillor Hoffel? No. Councillor Howe? We good?
Actually, I'm just sorry, refamiliarizing myself with the whereases. Should we, hold on here. Should we mention somewhere in here, and forgive me if I breezed over it already and not noticing, should we mention that this is specifically to help the district grow? And I don't know if we want to use the word taxpayer base, but really that's what we're trying to do, is attract people to our community. And this is a major deterrent, especially when we don't have a lot of houses available yet. So is there a way to mention that in here so that when our Silga reps are reading this out, people understand the background, like the real reason why this is so important to our community and other small towns?
No, that's good. They can wordsmith that in there. Good point. Any other comments by council on this? Councillor Leach, go ahead.
I've got one more, and I'm kind of just off the cuff too. So if this doesn't sound okay or is completely off, let me know. But a lot of the opposite to what Councillor Howe is saying, the people who are attracted to older trailers have a tendency to also, because they are on larger lots, have a tendency also to think, wow, we could subdivide this and put another trailer on here. And then we get into the problem of zoning that, you know, maybe we want to keep the mobile homes in the mobile home parks. So when we have a lot of I don't know how to explain it. Like I'm looking at like the legal non-conforming mobile home parks. I don't think that from the district perspective, we want to encourage those. I mean, I know we're getting our stuff together, but I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, may I jump in for a second here?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I think just to maybe try and save Councillor Leach a little bit. Mobile homes and the zones in which they are permitted uses are going to be one of the specific topics that I do come and speak to council about in drafting the new zoning bylaws. So there's going to be a bunch of specific topics that have been hot button items, and this is certainly going to be one of them, where we're going to look about whether we want to keep them on residential lots, we want to keep a lot specifically for mobile homes, or even if council wants mobile homes in the district at all. And these same questions I will also be posing to the public at public stakeholder meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Leach. Mr. Taylor, any other comments on this item? Okay, Mr. Deniger, we'll move forward.
Yes, please. We got 30 minutes left, just enough for 10 minutes for each remaining resolution. Thank you. And this is very good feedback.
Okay, good.
Appreciate this. And some really good creative ideas to put as many levers into it as possible to really pressure the province against the PVCO.
Some good input from council here, and it does have an impact on us going forward. And I'm looking forward to that. That's a real beast to wrestle to the ground in terms of what Councillor Leach and Mr. Taylor talked about, and that is where do we fit mobile homes in this thing. There's modular homes, which are unique and very, how you say, modern and up to date, and we are impacted with the motor homes. Okay, next one.
All right, I'll let the sponsor start the conversation. If Councillor Weeb would like to.
Next item.
I guess I kind of think it's self-explanatory, but I guess if you have to add notes, like the sergeant said earlier, we don't have enough RCMP officers here. I think it would help lure them here in some way, shape, or form. If they didn't have to, like I say, if they had somewhere to land with their families. And I'd like to include doctors and whatnot in that, doctors, nurses. And I don't know if that's feasible or not. I think it would cut down on our crime rate. The more people we have, the more officers we had here, the less drugs and crime we'd have.
Yeah, the resolution mentions medical staff, but we can, in this background, or add in some of the examples of the challenges we're having.
If I could, do we recognize that the RCMP HR has acknowledged and is working to rectify their point? I recognize that we've got the medical staff and the like, but should we not give a form of recognition that they've already approved that? We don't want to tick them off? Or am I reading something too much into this?
No, I think that's a good point. We should add that in. But it goes to show the difference between a community that has it and a community that doesn't. And the fact that we had to struggle so hard to get that.
Yeah.
Whereas if there's resolutions taken to heart by the province, it shouldn't be this struggle for other communities.
Well, that's right. But the point is we should show a form of appreciation. At the same time, we can use that as an effort that, see, at least that's been done. Now we'll want to continue it for the other folk that our community requires. Who's next there? Councillor. Okay, Councillor, are we good on this? Councillor Weeb, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to add something there. I think with all the construction around here as well, there is a lack of reasonable rental housing. And, you know, for someone to come into the community not knowing how long they're staying, or even knowing how long they're staying, there's nothing available to even rent.
I think that's a good point. I think council discussed this. Oh, sorry, Joe. I remember council was discussing this when we were actually working on the resolution. That's exactly one of the points we didn't capture in the resolution, was even if it's just temporary, for a doctor to find a place for their first few months before they then build or buy. This would open up that possibility and make it easier for them to get in here.
Okay. Anything else from council?
Can I just ask a quick question? Should we have this housing project built, who would maintain it if it's for doctors or RCMP or medical staff? I know that that's a far off question, but I mean, who would do that? Who would clean it before and after? And or should we just leave it with RCMP?
Well, I can say that the RCMP units will obviously be, they're purchased and hopefully they'll build some and they will be maintaining them. As regard to medical staff, I can't say that.
Right, I'm just saying if you've got more than one group of people being in there, then there's a new added responsibility is just all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a good point, but I don't think that the RCMP are going to want or allow others into those units. They belong to them. They will buy them, build them, and maintain them. But you bring up a good point. What about the other for the other units if we were able to convince that the province would build them for medical staff, etc.
I just also wanted to add in there that if they're tying up if I don't know how to put this, they're tying up the other public sector rentals, it actually forces the rental price to go higher because there's a higher demand. So then it's harder for people who have a lower class of job to rent a house. I don't know. Help me with that too, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's where the affordable housing project would come in, and our needs assessment will highlight that. And then, if we can work with the appropriate people to make sure there is affordable housing, I agree with Councillor Leach. That's a separate issue unto itself, and it's something we have to wrestle to the ground with.
It all like interconnects into the larger problem.
Yep. Anything else from council? Next one. How many more are there, Mr. Deniger?
There are two more. Next one is regarding funding maintenance of community halls and recreation centers. And then the final one is criminal justice reform.
Okay.
So I know there's been some good emails going back and forth between you, me, and Councillor Wiebe about this next one. So I'll briefly review those actually right now. So Silga actually had some questions for clarification because they were curious. They were wondering, does the municipality want to transfer these municipal assets to the regional district? No. Is the concern that these assets are being used for members outside of the municipality? Yes, to some degree. And then their third question was, why is the municipality or us asking that the funding go through the regional districts rather than a specific provincial fund to go directly to rural communities to support these assets? And I think one of the best reasons to not change this particular ask is that there's already a funding model in place for regional districts to assist with regional facilities like this. So why try to start something brand new and all the kerfuffle and the time involved in that, when the province could simply boost the funding to an existing model so that it better serves the communities that are basically saddled with this regional asset without the funding necessary to keep it operating. So those notes will be added in after this meeting.
Okay. Councillor Howe?
Thank you. No, I was just gonna ask if those were gonna be added, so that's fantastic.
Good. Who's next? Councillor Wiebe?
I thought they'd already be on there with all the emails going back and forth. Obviously, people are busy in our office. I really didn't want to recreate the wheel with this. I just think there's probably a lot of small communities that have older facilities that are costing them more than what the taxpayer can afford. And I think the regional districts have to step up and give us a bigger piece of the pie to go specifically towards these facilities.
If I can add, maybe a bit sensitive, but obviously one of the major, what do we call it now, Mr. Deniger? Not the trust, it's a
Legacy?
Yeah, Mr. Sheridan made a good point that we rebrand the trust into a legacy fund. And I mean, essentially, that's the type of thing. And obviously with BC Hydro, but it's sensitive to the sense that we're sneaking up on them to a degree, but at the same time, we have to engage them and engage the province. And we've done that with the Premier already. This would be an ideal situation in terms of where the legacy fund / trust would be able to assist in the operation of our community rec center. So I don't know whether we should work something in that way, Mr. Denegar, or just remain quiet until we get the next stage up with regard to that legacy fund proposal.
I'm thinking at this point, we should probably focus on boosting the regional district-based funding, because it's something that could apply to all rural communities in BC. And I know that Silga and UBCM are looking for resolutions that are truly universal. And we can remind them as well in our background that a lot of these facilities were built back when costs were significantly lower and efficiencies weren't there. No one worried about the price of heating. And over time, these things get costly, and to replace them is just not feasible. So we have to keep these old, inefficient facilities running.
Yeah, before I turn it over to Councillor Wiebe, I think that's right. And if we were to do that, it would just create confusion and a complexity that probably would backfire on us. I accept that. We should just remain quiet on that. Councillor Wiebe?
Yeah, I'm going to go on the mayor's usual input here. The province is kind of pushing down on the small communities, and everybody's supposed to be watching their carbon footprint, and you know, there's new regulations come in on how these things are supposed to be run and how they're supposed to function. And the small rural communities do not have the money to do that. And there is limited distribution of the grant funding. So I think that's a big one too. Like I say, if they want us to reduce our carbon footprint, then we need help.
Good point. Any other comments from council? Councillor Leach?
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what Councillor Wiebe is saying, is also when these facilities were built, you know, like it was a community effort. And we've found out, especially with like all the pool stuff, that when we don't hire consultants to do the engineering study, which are costly, then we're at liability, or we can't, they, you know, like some of the testing or the supplies have to be through Interior Health certified companies or programs. And so that all of those little things add up. And back when these were built, that wasn't the case. You know, you could just, you know, flood the front field with ice and have a public skating area. It's where that's not, we can't do that with liabilities.
Yep, good point. Any other comments from council? Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Okay, thank you very much. So this will be the last one. This was sponsored by Councillor Hopful, and it is pretty self-explanatory, this one. This is about criminal justice reform. I think we had a pretty robust conversation when this resolution actually came up. We do have some feedback here in my super digital form. So there's some wording change that we'll do, administrative wording change. And is Kimberly, are you bringing up the next one? Oh, perfect, thank you.
There we go.
So any additional comments would be welcome.
Councillor Hopful?
So I can speak to this a bit. I believe that this is obviously a provincial problem and far larger than that, but let's keep it to the provincial problem. I think, or I hope, that Silga and UBCM will be flooded with this resolution in itself from communities. And I think the more they get, the more impact that will have. And ultimately, there will be only one of these resolutions that will actually be moved on to UBCM. But again, I hope that at least Silga is flooded with these.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from council? I see none. Good. Good work, everyone.
Okay, thank you. So staff will draft these notes together into these little one-pager background documents, and we'll just distribute it via email to all of council, so you can let us know if we captured it correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Deniger. Thank you, Ms. G. Thank you, council, for that valuable input. We'll move to rise and report. Need someone to move that the March 15th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting rises and reports. Who will so move? Councillor Wiebe, second Councillor Howe. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. We'll see everyone at the regular council meeting at 7 o'clock. Is that correct, Mr. Taylor? So I'm not leaving anything on the agenda.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. The next meeting starts at 7.
Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. See you then.